Hello and welcome to Getaway Day. My name is Gautam, his name is Mason, and today we are going to be taking a trip through the NL West as we continue our Division Series preview. We've completed most of the divisions here, but we're going to wrap up with the National League West, the
National League
National League
East,
East, and then the
American
American
League
League East.
East.
So go back and listen to the previous episodes if you've missed some of those, and then stay tuned for the following episodes after this one. But this week is an
Which,
exciting week.
by the way, the the National League East is actually going to be coming out on Wednesday of this week, so that we can fit everything in before opening day, along with an overall preview. So check out Wednesday this week, in addition to the typical Thursday this week in baseball, and then we'll be back on normal schedule next week.
And the reason we're doing that is because opening day in Korea on Wednesday between the Dodgers and the Padres. So we wanted to have this episode, the NL West, ready for you before those two games. So we're gonna just do this conversational style, and we're gonna have some fun talking about all of these five teams. It's a very interesting division. Obviously, got the Dodgers at the top, you got the Rockies at the bottom, and then three teams kind of vying in the middle somewhere. But I think it's going to be an exciting division, and there's a lot to talk about. So let's get into it. The Dodgers. We got to start our preview with the Dodgers here because the Dodgers are clearly one of the top, if not, they've got to be like the top story in baseball going into this year, with the addition of Shohei Otani, with the addition of Yamamoto and others, Teoscar Hernandez. They've done a ton this offseason to bolster already what was one of the best teams in the league last year. It was a 100-win team in 2023.
I believe so. 162, correct.
Yeah, so for me, all I've been thinking all offseason is how excited I am to watch the Dodgers top of their lineup. Um, Mookie Betts, Shohei Otani, Freddie Freeman. It's extremely special to me because I can't think of any other time in my entire life that we've had like three future Hall of Famers batting back to back in the same lineup, and they're all in the primes of their careers. It's like I'm going to be trying to watch as many first innings of Dodgers games as I can this year.
Yeah, so this team is so stacked that a lot of the time I kind of start forgetting some of the guys that are on this team. Like Otani and Yamamoto are the two that everybody's been talking about this offseason. And so they're the two that are like at the top of your mind. Obviously Mookie Betts, because if I couldn't remember the guy my cat was named after, we'd probably have to have me committed. I won't lie to you. I have forgotten about Freddie Freeman a couple of times. There's no good reason for it. He's one of the greatest first basemen of all time. It's definitely of like our generation. He's probably the best. And he's still playing at an incredibly high level at 34 years old, 13 years into his career. And I'm somehow forgetting him because they have so many other mega stars on this team. And then after him, it continues like not mega stars necessarily, unless you're looking at Clayton Kershaw being back, even though he's on the IL. But you've got like these next level guys like Will Smith and Max Muncy, who are some of the best at their positions in the league. Muncy is probably one of the best pure power hitters in the league. Will Smith is probably the best catcher in the league, not named Adley Rutschman. And these are guys that are being forgotten because of the bigger names on their team.
Yeah. What do you think about the expectations on this team? Do you think that's going to play a role here, or is this team just like too good, too big to fail that they just cannot really like? Is there a path for this team to actually not be um, an elite team? Like they might not win 110 games. That's not crazy to say. Obviously, it's hard to project any team to win 110 games, but that's that's where we are with the Dodgers at this point, and I don't know, like I don't see a lot of ways that things can go dreadfully wrong for this team.
What I will say is this: they are too big to fail to the point of the 2023 St. Louis Cardinals, a team where nobody expect or everyone expected them to win the division. They came in fifth with an under 500 record for the first time in 15 years or whatever. I think it was 15 years actually. 2009 was the last one before that. This team is too good for that. Like I don't see a world in which they come in under 500. Now, is there a world where they don't win the division? Absolutely. In fact, 2 years ago, we saw that exact situation play out where they did everything right. They won 106 games and they still lost to the Giants. So that is 100% a possibility. A first round playoff exit. Possibility. But I really think the floor for this team is somewhere around 87 wins. And that's assuming that Freddie Freeman falls off a cliff and starts aging. Like your lower guys in the order, like Outman, Teo, Jason Hayward, Gavin Lux, don't do anything at all.
Yeah.
You get injuries to guys like Ohtani and Glasnow, Bobby Miller.
That's what I was going to say. It has to be a combination of like dreadful injuries to their top players and insanely bad luck, or like all of their players doing bad at the same time. And it just, with so many good players, it's like even if a couple players take steps back, a couple players have down seasons, whatever it may be, they have so much depth throughout the roster and star power to cover up whatever flaws may arise. I mean, things are not going to go perfectly for the Dodgers. They're probably going to have this stretch during the season that's about 2 or 3 weeks where they win like 2 games a week, and people are saying, "Oh, the Dodgers are in trouble here," and that's just something that's going to happen to this team, no matter how good you are. But it's going to be brief, right? It's not gonna last for long. The talent will always come to the top.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
And
then
this team is at some point going to be getting some guys back that I think will make it even bolster it more towards the end. Guys like Dustin May, I imagine by the end of the season he'll be back, right? Because he had flexor tendon surgery in July of last year. So he'll be about a year removed from that. I imagine he'll be potentially coming back.
yeah,
Hopefully.
he'll be coming back. Hopefully, Clayton Kershaw will be back after his shoulder procedure, and then
Emmett Sheehan.
Walker Bueller before probably anybody, because he seems like he's actually healthy right now. It's just they're probably just managing his workload. They want him to pitch deep into the season into October, so they're just gonna start his innings counter a little bit later on and see what they can do at the beginning of the season. I guess the Dodgers have a very obvious strategy when it comes to pitchers, and that's that they don't really care about quantity of innings. They're looking for the highest quality of starting pitcher innings that they can find. So they go out and get a guy like Tyler Glasnow, who's never done more than 120 innings in a season. They get Yamamoto, who has never pitched, on a 5-day schedule like MLB pitchers typically go and do. Bobby Miller is a young pitcher. James Paxton is a guy that constantly gets hurt, but when he's on the field, results are there. He's big strikeout pitcher, big arm. Um, it's just like one guy after another. When you get past those top four that are kind of penciled in there right now, they have quality arms that could make a lot of starts for them this year, or at least some starts. Talking about Gavin Stone, Michael Grove, Emmett Sheehan, who you mentioned earlier, and then Kershaw, May, Bueller. It's like they're deep. They're very, very deep.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of looking at some of the guys that they have in the minors right now, in the off chance that, well, not the off chance, the likelihood that they'll deal with some injuries, just to see kind of who they've got. And as far as pitching is concerned, like they're pretty well set to fill up their bullpen if there's any issues there. Because they've got JP Fireeisen, Gus Varland, Denelson Lamet, Nabil Krismat, TJ McFarland, all in AAA. Like, they've got a ton of relievers that they're not the best relievers in the world. I mean, that's why they're at AAA right now, but they're guys who can come up and give you some quality innings out of the bullpen if you need them. They've got some position players like Andy Pajes, who's 23 years old, still prospect. And he actually last year was the number 3 prospect in the organization. They've got Trey Sweeney, who's not on the 40 man, but he was just brought over from the Yankees there at short. Miguel Vargas is still there, still young, and still trying to vie for a spot on this team. And Diego Cartaya at catcher. So it's like they have good quality prospects still behind all these established superstars. So outside of maybe the starting pitching, because all their depth is on the IL right now, this is a very deep team.
100%. Yeah. You named a bunch of names right there. I got one more deep sleeper pitcher for you that has an eye-popping stat that's like, this is amazing.
Relief pitcher or starting pitcher?
So he's been a starter. I mean, maybe his long-term spot is as a reliever. The guy's name is Kyle Hurt. And Kyle Hurt last year in Double A, he pitched 65 innings and he struck out 110 batters in 65 innings. Then he got moved up to AAA and he struck out another 42 in 27 innings. This guy's like insane strikeout rates through the minors. And if he could make it work as a starter, that would be like, that's like Spencer Strider-esque stuff.
I was completely unaware of him, but I am going to go look him up now.
Yeah, exactly. I thought you might be interested in those numbers. So yeah, Dodgers are clearly like still maintaining their status as the top dog in this division. We're going to talk about the other teams here coming up, but I don't know. Like, what are your final thoughts on the Dodgers here?
They are. If we were in the 1968 and prior setup for how the postseason works, where it's just the winner of the league goes into the World Series, I would say that the Dodgers are very, very easily the National League favorite. With the kind of March Madness style bracket that we have now, it's really hard to pick a World Series favorite. I would pick them to have the number 1 seed in the playoffs.
All right, so you think the Dodgers are better than the Braves?
I think it's close, but I do think that there are some pieces here that I like the Dodgers a little bit better.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the Dodgers. Moving along to maybe their biggest threat, the reigning NL defending champions, the Arizona Diamondbacks, who did not just sit on their laurels. They went out and they tried to improve. And the way they did that was by actually signing free agents. So they signed Eduardo Rodriguez to be a mid-rotation guy. They signed Jock Peterson to DH. They traded for Eugenio Suarez. And I think, did I miss any other moves?
They brought in Randall Grichuk, who is currently on the IL.
Okay.
Then he's not officially on the 40 man yet, but it looks like they're bringing in Tucker Barnhart as their backup catcher.
So made some minor moves to the bench and lineup that I think are incremental upgrades, because this team wasn't really a world beater last year. They did make the World Series, but they weren't clearly in the elite tier of NL teams, I would say. And they had a lack of power. That's why I like that they brought in Jock and Suarez, because those guys, if they do one thing, it's hit home runs, and this lineup needs it, because you've got electric performers like Corbin Carroll, Ketel Marte, who really showed out in the playoffs and the World Series and stuff. But beyond like Christian Walker, they didn't really have a power source. So, do you think the Diamondbacks did enough in their lineup to take the next step here and become like a more consistent, good offense?
I I think so. I think the power that they're kind of expecting is going to be kind of natural growth from some of these young guys like Corbin Carroll, Alec Thomas. There's another outfielder that I'm completely blanking on. I don't know why. Uh, but anyway, can't think of his name, but we'll come back to that later. But I do think they're kind of expecting there to be a little bit more power coming from those guys, probably more Corbin Carroll and Alec Thomas. But bringing in Gino, bringing in Jock is certainly going to help drive in some runs. And a lot of the guys on this team, once they're on base, there's a fairly good chance they're going to score. Guys like Corbin Carroll, Ketel Marte, and Alec Thomas, who are just so freaking fast.
Yeah.
Like,
Is the guy you're thinking of Jake McCarthy by any
yes,
chance?
yes, it
Okay.
is.
Yeah. I mean,
I actually
don't have
remembered
much
it
hope
as
for
I
him.
was talking about fast guys. It's like, oh shoot,
He's a really fast guy.
yeah.
Yeah. He might beat Corbin Carroll in a race. But yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I think those young players can take the next step. So a guy like Gabriel Moreno, who's an elite defensive catcher, he was like one of the best at throwing out base stealers and does a great job blocking and receiving, doing everything a catcher needs to do. And he really started improving with the bat as the season went along. He makes tons of contact. Um, I think of him as like Keibert Ruiz, but he's got better defense, and he actually has the potential, I think, to grow into some more power here. So he's a guy that I feel like is like a key for the lineup to get better. And then you also mentioned Alec Thomas, who I think he he was a former top prospect. He was a like a first or second round pick, made it to the majors as a really young player, and he struggled. He struggled a lot, but in the postseason, we saw that this guy can actually really hit. He hasn't really done it at in the regular season. I think just more time, he's going to get there.
I mean,
And
the three guys that really kind of showed out there in the postseason were Gabby Moreno, Alec Thomas, and Geraldo Perdomo, if I remember correctly.
that's true. Yeah.
So those three, if those three can take steps forward, and Gabby, I fully expect to take steps forward. He is so talented, and that Jays team was just so overcrowded at the catcher's position, and so they ended up moving Gabby and getting back.
They also got Gurriel in that trade.
Yes, and they got Gurriel and gave up Dalton Varsho, who at the time we thought was going to be like the big guy on this team. But it really seems like they're not really missing Varsho all that much. They get their catcher, they get a power bat for left field with a bit more of a veteran presence to come in with all these young guys. So, and then with Perdomo, he's been there for 2 years now, and he's been showing steady growth over those 2 years. And he's not the biggest bat in the world. He's maybe a 10 homer guy. He's maybe a 240 hitter, but he does a really good job of trapping balls up the middle, getting guys out, and he's quick. So
Yeah.
if he gets on base, he can score first to home on a double. Like, that's kind of the big strength of this team from an offensive perspective. And so with some of these other guys in the lineup, you're not really as concerned about your Geraldo Perdomo hitting 30 home runs with a 290 average. So
Yeah, I mean, Geraldo Perdomo has always been a weird player for me because on the field he looks like he would be really good and he plays amazing defense. But then when you look at any of his like Statcast, you're like, this guy's like the worst hitter in the league. How's he doing this? Um, they clearly love him because they're making him the full time shortstop when they have a top prospect in Jordan Lawler, who's pretty close to being major league ready. So he's like hot on Perdomo's heels, I think.
well, and I'm kind of interested what they do with Blaze Alexander too, because isn't he
Yeah, no,
isn't he a shortstop?
I think so, yeah, and I think he's been killing it in the spring.
Yeah, so basically you've got, and maybe Blaze can play third, and they're gonna try and figure out some form of like maybe have Gino play against lefties at DH, have Blaze Alexander at third on those days, and do some kind of like 3-man thing here, and just give Perdomo the reins at short. Maybe that's what their
Yeah,
plan is, but like,
Lawler's another guy that could take over third. So maybe I'm wrong about saying that Perdomo is the guy that needs to be watching out for his job. He does, but I think Suarez might lose his job first because he seems like the guy that's in clear decline and coming
yeah,
off a bad season.
I think if Jock struggles at all against righties, he'd probably be the first to lose his job,
Yeah,
just
I think
because he's not really got a whole lot else he can do. He's a
yeah,
DH.
yeah,
He only faces right-handed pitchers.
yeah.
So
And if he can't do that thing, then yeah, what's the point of Jock?
yeah, at which point you can move Gino to permanent DH, or have Lourdes go to DH and figure something else out. But I don't know. I think this team has a lot of good options for position players this year. The youth movement is still strong. Like, they've got more guys in the wings. Where I'm really curious to see how this team can perform is on the pitching staff, because last year that was still kind of their rough spot. Behind
Especially
Zach
the bullpen.
Gallen and Merrill Kelly, they really didn't have a whole lot of reliable guys throughout the year. Like, they obviously played or pitched well enough to get into the postseason and make a run. And in the postseason, Brandon Pfaadt started to kind of show up a little bit, and Ryan Nelson started to show up a little bit. But like, Mad Bum was there at the beginning of last year, wasn't he? And he ended up getting DFA'd at some point. Like,
Yeah,
they
it was
just,
pretty early on.
yeah, they just were not able to figure it out for the first half of the year. So I think the big thing here is bringing in Erod to give like a solid number 3, give Brandon Pfaadt, Ryan Nelson, and Tommy Henry a little bit of time here to kind of vie for those last 2 spots, see who takes off. And based on last year's results and so far this spring, that's going to be Pfaadt and Nelson.
Yeah, no, I think Fodd's definitely he's penciled in. He's got to be right. He's a guy that showed that potential last postseason, and that matters, right? He didn't do it during the regular season, but he did it in actually the biggest stages and
Where it
biggest
mattered
moments.
most, he was
Yeah,
able to
so
perform. So
I've got no doubt that Brandon Fogg's gonna step up. I think he's gonna be a very solid pitcher, and they need him. Like he feels like the key to this rotation because I feel good about like Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, and Eduardo. They we know who they are. They've been doing it for quite a while. I am a little worried that Zach Gallen threw like almost 250 innings with postseason combined. I mean, maybe that catches up with him, but it seems like pitchers are dropping like flies, and I'm scared.
yeah, it's certainly not been kind to pitchers so far this spring. So
Right, and I think just in general, they may have a little bit of a starting pitcher depth issue because you mentioned like Nelson and Tommy Henry. I don't know if they've got like a big prospect coming through to save them if there's an injury.
I I don't think so. Maybe Blake Walston, but I don't know, with
Yeah,
with Dre Jameson being out for the year with Tommy John surgery in September of last year. Like, yeah, they're kind of hurting for depth here.
yeah. But that's like pretty typical. It's not easy to build up that depth, and that's why the Dodgers are so impressive at
Yeah,
doing it.
they do have Slade Ciccone as well.
Yeah. All right. So, any last thoughts on the Diamondbacks before we move on?
I don't know where I'm going to stack them up in my rankings yet, so I'm going to hold off.
Okay. Keep thinking about it. I know that they're going to be ahead of this next team that we're going to talk about.
I don't know. I got some really good things to say about their owner.
Oh boy. So we're talking about the Colorado Rockies, who just the gap between the Rockies and like every other organization seems to just like get wider every year. How is this even possible?
Yet
When we
they are not in the worst 3 teams in the league?
I I don't know. I kind of disagree. I think they are. I think they're that bad.
It's the White
Have you
Sox, the A's.
the Nats that we talked about recently? Like
Yeah.
they're pretty bad.
So I think it's those 3 and then the Rockies.
So I'm gonna make the case for why the Rockies are the worst team, though.
Is it
This
going to be the
pitching
same case
staff,
that we always have?
I mean, probably,
Okay.
but I'm gonna make it again. Just
Reasonable.
because yeah, I've made it before doesn't mean I can't make it again.
I'm going to be mad at Dick Monfort again. So
Yeah,
go
no,
for
some
it.
things never change. So this pitching staff is probably one of the worst pitching staffs I've ever seen. The Nats are really bad. This one might be worse. Like Kyle Freeland has just been an absolute disaster since he signed his extension. Um, and then beyond him, it's like Cal Quantrill, Austin Gomber, Ryan Feltner, Dakota Hudson. These guys are all either cast offs from their original teams or they're just like simply not good starters. And
2 of them were poorly developed Rockies homegrown guys. 2 of them are Cardinals castoffs, and the other is a Cleveland castoff who was originally a Padres castoff.
yeah.
So
So
I don't know.
like
Someone get him a volleyball named Wilson.
I feel so bad about this, but I don't see. I used to like Cal Quantrill, but when you throw Cal Quantrill, a guy that never could really miss bats, into Colorado, like I just don't see how that's going to work. Why don't the Rockies just get creative and like try to think outside the box and do something different? Just because they need something different to.
Well, didn't we do an entire episode on this? That basically the way that that stadium plays, having fireballers who can miss bats with straight pitches is the way to go because balls don't break nearly as well up there. Wasn't that an entire episode that we did a couple years ago?
That'd be at least something that they should try, right? And
You
they've
would
not
think,
really done it.
but at the same time, they're just so bad at scouting and development in general that even on the position player side, it's the same old story that we've been talking about forever. It seems everyone who they bring up and develop, other than Charlie Blackmon, seems like they are terrible. Like Brendan Rodgers is somehow still starting second baseman, and I really don't understand it. He's never shown the ability of the number 1 prospect in the organization that he was. Same with Garrett Hampson before him. Sam Hilliard is back on the team. Those 3 guys are the exact same guys. None of them developed. Their best players were Elias Diaz, who came over from Pittsburgh. Lourdes Montero is one of their best hitters, and he's a bench bat. He came in the Arenado trade from St. Louis, and Nolan Jones, who they got in a trade from Cleveland. Like, other than Ryan McMahon, all of their good players have come from elsewhere and were developed elsewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah. They're not good. They don't know what they're doing. It's
yeah,
like at least the A's are purposely sucking.
yeah.
It,
This that like what's the plan here? I don't even see any path forward for this team to get better. That's the main problem. Like I get it, you're a rebuilding team. You're probably going to not be very good. You're not going to have all your talent at the major league level, but I don't see like an influx of promising young players coming through the system. Um,
like Drew Romo is finally getting close to the majors. 22 years old, he's at AAA. He was in the Arizona Fall League last year, non-roster invitee to spring this year, and he's a really good prospect. I think he was the 11th overall in the the 11th overall in the organization according to Fangraphs last year. When he was drafted, people were excited about him. He was drafted in 2020 and haven't really heard his name at all since. But Grant Levine, kind of the same thing. First rounder in 2018, 24 years old. He's at AAA.
I don't even
But
know who these guys are. You're
well,
mentioning first round
exactly.
picks, and I don't
That's
even
the
know who they
problem.
are. So it's like they're not.
Adele Amador.
Yeah,
Um,
he's a good prospect.
yeah,
There you go.
he's a good prospect. They actually have shortstop prospect who maybe someone can finally get um, Brendan Rodgers out of this lineup because he plays second and short. But I don't know, and he's close. He'll be up this year, is my guess, right?
Maybe.
But then, like, I'm looking at their pitching prospects, and they don't have any. Um,
But
Maybe
really,
Ryan Rollison, their first round pick in 2018.
but he's been talked about for years, and he's never made anything happen. So it's like the biggest point is the one that you're making is that they do not develop their players because number one, no one, everyone knows that Colorado is a bad team and it's a terrible place to play, even for hitters, because of the road effects. So they have to develop because no one
Okay,
wants to sign there.
two names that I think you do know, and they're at double A now, so they're getting close-ish. Zach Veen and Benny Montgomery. Also both first round picks. Montgomery in 21. Veen was yet another first round pick in 2020 that they had. Those two could actually be something.
But we say that about every Rockies prospect, and literally none of them pan out. So I have no like faith until I see something.
True. What if they just bring Diane Jorge up now? Because so far they haven't had a whole lot of time to touch him and mess him up because he just signed out of Cuba in 2022.
I don't even know who that is.
He is a single A shortstop for them right now, but he's their number 2 prospect. He's people really like him. He's only 21, so he's young.
So now that we've had this talk here, how can you tell me that this team's not worse than the Nationals? Like it is.
I think I have maybe three things that make me a little bit more comfortable with
Okay,
this
so
team.
I tried to ask that question because I want to hear something positive about this team.
Nolan Jones, a hopefully somewhat healthy Chris Bryant, and the seemingly always decent Charlie Blackmon. The top of their lineup is actually fairly decent. I don't want to say good, but Nolan Jones showed that he can be really, really good last year.
Yeah,
I was very
awesome.
impressed with what Nolan Jones was able to do, especially after Cleveland basically said, we're not going to give you a shot. Just see you. We'll send you over to die in Colorado. And he came out and he showed he's got power. He could play left field, even though he was originally a third baseman. But I don't know. He's a 25 homer guy. He could get you some steals. He'll hit for a decentish average. So he's a bright spot. Outside of that, it gets really hard. Tovar had a solid season last year as a rookie. If he can repeat that and God forbid improve on it, maybe they've got 2 good young guys to start building around, but they don't have anything to build with. They're playing Fortnite no build and trying to build.
I asked for the positive things about the Rockies, and you
I
still
did.
tailed into
negativity.
negativity.
I said they have 2 players that could potentially become cornerstones.
But then you went back into trashing them.
Well, okay. Well, they have 2 potential cornerstones, period.
So wait, who's the second one? Oh,
Ezekiel Tovar.
Oh, Tovar. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair.
Maybe Brenton Doyle. How do you feel about Brenton Doyle?
Brenton Doyle said that he put on like 20 pounds of muscle this offseason, so I'm excited. So Brenton Doyle is actually a guy that makes sense. I'm not saying he's good at all, but he's an ideal fit for the team because he is an absolutely amazing center fielder, and they need that in that big ballpark that elevates BABIP, and you need someone to cover all that ground. And Brenton Doyle showed this guy can go and get him. He's like really good out there, and he deserves to play. He's actually like another like guy I would say is mildly interesting
Okay, so we have
in
three
this team.
cornerstone players, two aging stars who are still somewhat good. So we have five decentish guys in the lineup. Okay, let's stop before we get back into bad stuff.
Okay, fine. Well, let's move on. We've taken enough of your time talking about the Rockies. Like this is not a
We'll
fun
do
team.
another Rockies only episode this year. We haven't done one in a couple years.
They're kind of depressing though.
Yeah, but I cursed in that one.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the Giants. The Giants are also kind of a confusing team. It's always kind of difficult to get a read on what they're doing here. They've struggled to capture a true star, and they simply don't have one on the roster still. And that's kind of forced them to go and maybe overpay a little bit for some of these unproven guys or whatever free agents are available in the middle of the market. So this year they go out and they got Jung Hoo Lee, superstar from Korea. Um, and he got like way more than I think people thought that he might, but he could be a really good player, and he's a true center fielder. We think they go get Jorge Soler and Matt Chapman to add power to the lineup, and I don't know, like, what do you think about this lineup? It's just kind of like a bunch of average-ish guys. It's not like there's any true standouts.
Oh, I missed something. I was trying to come up with a number that was going to be my response, and I totally blubbed on one button. I was trying to get the average age of this lineup, uh, and that was going to be my number. So I, I don't know. I'm intrigued. I think this could be the best lineup they've had in a couple years. I think if Lee has the contact skills translate over, which contact is contact is contact, that's probably going to translate over from the MP or the KBO to the MLB. So you have a big contact guy leading off. You have a couple of guys who've been pretty solid for you the last couple seasons in Tyro Estrada and Lamont Wade. Then you have power out of Jorge Soler. For some reason, we have Michael Conforto. I don't get it. Whatever. Moving on. Matt Chapman. He's going to rebound offensively a little bit from what he was last year. Defensively, he's still really, really good. So cool. Yaz, kind of just an average major leaguer. Nothing special. Patrick Bailey, not the best hitter, but really good catcher. And if he can figure out how to hit a little bit more often, I think he could be a really good catcher. And this lineup becomes three or four really key pieces and some solid ancillary pieces there. So I like it from a general lineup build perspective. There's definitely a lot of room for improvement, and I'm still working on getting that average age because I started talking.
I'll give you some relief here. So I have a good question I think here. So the Giants have been run um, by Gabe Kapler, right? And he and the front office have kind of agreed that a lot of platoons is the best way to maximize his team. We saw that work really, really well in 2021. Average age over 30.
Average age is over 30 years old for this lineup. That's including
But
Nick Ahmed for some reason at shortstop.
yeah, I got thoughts on that, but basically, like, this team has been run as like a bunch of moving parts, a lot of platoons, a lot of matchup games, and in 2021 it worked great. They had an insane season where they won what 100 plus games,
Like
and
106, and then the
yeah, it was
Dodgers
like
had
107.
105, or they had
Yeah,
107. Dodgers were 106.
yeah. So clearly that method can work, but then the last 2 years it hasn't really worked out the same. Obviously, they don't have like Buster Posey and amazing Brandon Belt and Brandon Crawford. But I'm wondering with Bob Melvin now in charge, a guy that I kind of think of as a traditional manager, maybe like more on the old school side of the range. Does he go more back to like everyday type player roles, or is he also going to do as much mixing and matching with this lineup as the Giants have been doing for several years now?
I kind of expect that Melvin is going to find his guys and stick with them. I think Matt Chapman stuck at third base, which that one makes sense. I don't think anyone was questioning that. I think at
Yeah.
some point, Marco Luciano will take over that shortstop spot, and that's just going to be his to go. Conforto, Lamont Wade, and Mike Yastrzemski, plus your Wilmer Flores, Luis Matos, Austin Slater type guys. I really don't know.
Well, the personnel suggests that they should continue doing platoons because these players are not full-time players. They're just not good enough, in my opinion.
Well, and so I'm kind of wondering how soon you start seeing a shift to bringing up like Elliot Ramos and some of these other young guys that they have. I mean, Blake Sable can go back and play in the outfield. Granted, he also isn't the strongest hitter, if I remember right.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's a it's less talked about maybe, but have the Giants done a good job of developing their young hitters? Not really, because they keep relying on the platoon bats, the older guys that are maybe a level above, but they haven't let their young players play. And when they have played, they've been kind of lackluster, right? Like Ramos hasn't shown to be a major league hitter. Patrick Bailey was like 20% worse than league average last year. It's like
I so I
they need
think
more time.
I
They,
think
I'm not
this
saying,
is I think this is maybe telling. When you look through like their depth chart here, I'm looking at specifically outfield. The average age of their AAA outfielders looks to be about 27. The average age of their AA outfielders looks to be about 24, like closer to 25. Like it seems like at every level, their outfielders are older than the average, which is
they're just
not a good
that's not good.
sign.
Yeah,
Like they have guys who, like Grant McCray, should be like in theory he should be in AAA. He should be kind of a stud there if you developed your guys well. Like he was a highly touted prospect at the time. Same was Elliot Ramos, who was the 19th overall pick in 2017. 2017. Luciano still has not really gotten much time to run with it. Casey Schmidt kind of hasn't played well enough to earn himself a job in the major league roster. Like they have not developed anybody, it seems, in years. Yeah. And the pitching side is the exact same thing. Like outside of Logan Webb, Kyle Harrison finally made it up. And I think he's potentially like the first guy that they've developed correctly. But I kind of wonder if that's almost like he was too talented to mess up.
yeah, yeah. And speaking of the pitching, they have like behind Webb, it's scary because you got Kyle Harrison, who has simply not pitched very many innings, and he's not really a guy you can count on to go pitch 150 innings, in my opinion. Like I think he's going to be like a low innings total because of the way that they babied him through the minor leagues. He was like always pitching 4 or 5 innings at a time. He's certainly not equipped to go deep into starts, I think. And then Jordan Hicks is kind of the same way because he's never taken that full starter's workload for a full season. And yeah,
Well,
just total wild card.
with him, there's a reason for that. That reason is his control. Like he throws so hard with such bad control that in short stints it works.
It works. Yeah.
It works really well. Like he doesn't really miss bats as often as you would expect for a guy that can throw 105, but he's able to induce weak contact on the ground because nobody can catch up to it. They just pop it on the ground over to the first baseman or the third baseman if they're a lefty. Like it's a pretty easy 1, 2, 3 inning, assuming that your first and third baseman can make a standard play. So, but
it's like
as a starter,
when I was talking about like the Giants kind of having to overpay, Hicks feels like an overpay. They gave him 4 years and 44 million. It's like he
yeah,
might end up in the middle of the bullpen if the starting thing doesn't work out, and then you're like you're out of luck because I don't even know who these guys behind him in the rotation are. It's like Keaton Wynn and Mason Black. These are total no names at this point.
yeah.
So it's another year. I mean, Alex Cobb is coming back fairly soon, so that'll help a little bit. But it's once again another year where it's going to be a ton of like tandem starts, short starts, and relying on that bullpen.
Is Robbie Ray coming back during the season?
Yeah, so Robbie Ray should be back at some point mid-season too. So that's a good point. Overall, I think this was pretty negative actually on the Giants. I was expecting to have more good stuff to say. I do
Honestly,
think
I was too.
overall, yeah, like I was feeling like I liked their moves in like vacuums, but overall it just feels once again kind of underwhelming and
Well, and I think the things that we've pointed out, had they not made the moves they've made, they would be in a much worse position. So like the moves even outside of a vacuum did improve this team.
they improved it.
I think is maybe the positive spin that we should be putting here is the moves they made did make a positive impact. And I think
Correct.
will help this team get to that next generation of players. But similar to the Rockies to a significantly lesser extent, but still very similar to the Rockies, they need to kind of figure out what their problem is and why they're not able to get these young players to the majors as productive players.
And it's the last point on their shortstop situation. So Nick Ahmed seems like the clear favorite to take the starting job this season, and that just doesn't make sense to me because you gotta let Luciano play because he's the guy that could be the star. There's not one other guy in the lineup that I think has the potential to be a star at this point, and that's tough. Like, it's obviously a very not a good situation to be in, but if you don't even play the young guy, then how are you going to find out?
I disagree with you. I think we put Soler in right field. We put Patrick Bailey at DH. And we bring Tom Murphy in as catcher, and I think Tom Murphy's a superstar.
Agreed. Tom Murphy's a beast.
Yes. Figured it out. Hire me, Farhan.
Yeah.
I cracked the case.
Okay. So that's the Giants. Last team here in this division, that's the Padres. And the Padres just pulled off kind of a stunning move, but not stunning at the same time. Go listen to This Week in Baseball where we talk about the Dylan Cease trade in full detail. But the thought that I just had today about that is they lost Blake Snell and they basically replaced him with right-handed Blake Snell.
Yep.
I mean, Dylan Cease is the same guy, same type of pitcher. He's insane strikeouts, but struggles with control, walks quite a few batters, has inconsistent seasons, has some good seasons, has some amazing seasons. And it makes sense, right? Like it's hard to replace a Cy Young winner like Blake Snell, and they actually just did that.
Yeah,
with the exact same guy.
I don't remember if I actually said that last night or if it was just a thought that had crossed my mind at one point. But yeah, it's like I was looking at it and it's like, well, Darvish, Musgrove, Cease is a very inconsistent guy, but he has great seasons and bad seasons. It's not like, I don't know. It feels like the top three in this rotation are the same as last year with Blake Snell, and then you add Michael King and Johnny Burrito. So I think this is a better rotation than they've had the last 2 or 3 years. I think it's a much deeper rotation. I do think there's some questions on Cease's consistency and if he's going to be able to put up a good season this year. But I mean, that's kind of every year, and you always had that with Snell. The first half last year was really not all that great, but his second half was
really
so
bad, yeah.
so good that he won the Cy Young anyway. Cease has that same ability, and he's shown it in the past. So you add two more, like one legit starter in Michael King, and then one young guy who has some potential there in Johnny Burrito. And then in their bullpen, they brought in
Yuki Matsui.
yeah,
Woo
Yuki
Suk Go.
Matsui, Woo-Suk Go. They got Wandy Peralta. They signed as a free agent.
Yep.
I think that's it.
Also, they traded for Eniel De Los Santos. So they basically remade the back end of their bullpen with Robert Suarez still there. Obviously, Josh Hader's not back. But yeah, I guess like AJ Preller gets hated on a lot because the Padres haven't won that much. But I love the fact that he is like so all in and he just leans into all the risk he can find. Like maybe it's not like yeah, it's clearly like a very risky strategy to take, but I respect it. And they're not just laying down and they're not giving up just because they traded Juan Soto. This team is trying to win right now. They've got clear holes, which we're going to get to here, but um, I like the fact that they go out and they get Dylan Cease. I think he's going to be really huge for them this year.
Yeah. The other thing that I kind of wanted to talk about is, so like Johnny Burrito and Michael King both came over in the Juan Soto trade, along with Kyle Higashioka, who is going to be the backup catcher most likely to Luis Camposano. And that's a really good backup catcher to have. Kyle Higashioka has been a really solid catcher for the Yankees the last couple of years. Like, not the greatest hitter in the world. There's a reason Jose Trevino took over as the everyday starter. But he's a guy that you feel very comfortable throwing there at the backstop with a guy who has some occasional control issues like Dylan Cease. Like Yu Darvish with 9 different pitches, he's not an easy guy to catch, I can't imagine. So having a guy who has that ability to kind of just manage the game from behind the plate, it's a really good guy to have on your bench. So, and pairing him on the bench with a young guy like Eguy Rosario, who came up for them last year, it seems like they're building a bench that definitely seems reasonable, given you don't have too many holes in your lineup.
However, speaking of the lineup, we've got some issues in the outfield. So we got superstar Fernando Tatis. I think he's primed for an awesome season. He's going to get back to where he was basically an MVP candidate every year. But then when you get past him, it's like, what is going on? Right now, Roster Resource has Jackson Merrill, who is one of their top prospects, penciled in as a starting center fielder. This guy's never played center field except for the spring training, basically. And then Jurickson Profar, who's apparently back with this team. And like, there's other candidates like Graham Pauley, and there's another guy, Jacob Marcy, who may play a role here. But I don't understand why this team has not signed a veteran outfielder. They could use a Tommy Pham or who's another guy. I mean, they could have used Adam Duvall before he signed.
Yeah, I don't know. Like there's definitely some pretty big holes here. Part of it Like I do think that there's a little bit of it where this team just isn't 100% sure what they're gonna do here long term. Since Peter Seidler passed away last year, it kind of, when your owner passes away and they've been all in, it kind of puts everybody on pause. Like, what is going to happen? And they did reduce payroll. They traded away Juan Soto and reduced the payroll there. Then they traded for Dylan Cease instead of signing a starter. So like they've decreased the payroll from last year, and maybe they just don't want to spend anymore, and that's kind of why they're doing this. And that's my guess. It doesn't make it right. Like I don't like giving owners not credit, but like I don't like giving them pass on not spending money, because they could definitely afford it, period. Full stop. Um but at the same time, I do know that going through an ownership change is probably not the easiest thing, and they are still spending money. They are still trying to compete. So it's like I'm almost going to give them a half pass
Yeah,
on not
no,
going out
like
for an outfielder.
yeah, and maybe we're gonna be surprised here because the Padres kind of have some recent history of letting prospects actually take jobs. They are not doing one of these rocky situations where they just play like old washed up guys. They will let Graham Pauley and Jacob Marcy and Jackson Merrill play actual meaningful games for this team and get plate appearances and stuff and see if they are the answer. And for some reason Jerkson Profar also continues to get at bats. But other than that, it's like I don't know, like maybe we're a little overly concerned about the situation and it's gonna work itself out.
Yeah, and I mean, it's probably not a whole lot better than having Jurickson Profar out there, but if it really comes to it and they need like a true center fielder, Tim LaCastro is in their farm system.
Yeah.
Like they have a few guys who can do it. They still have a couple young guys who've come from other teams, like Cal Mitchell, who signed from Pittsburgh after being DFA'd. Like he's still only 25. He could take left field and try and run with it. Like they have options. They just don't have any exciting options outside of like Merrill and Marcy. So it's I think they could fill those holes with slightly above replacement level players and kind of round out this team. But I think them going to the prospects is maybe the high risk, high reward bet that they want to make. And
Yeah.
I don't blame them for that.
So a final question on the Padres here. So we kind of like their pitching. We like what they did with their bullpen. We're a little worried about the back of their lineup and their young players that they're going to be relying on. But are these their studs? Are their studs good enough to get them where they need to be and be a playoff team this year?
I think so. I think the regular that I'm most concerned about is Jake Cronenworth. Just he
He
hasn't
was
been the
terrible
same
last year.
guy that he was his first two seasons. Like
Yeah.
I fully believe he could get back to that, but he hasn't shown me anything recently that makes me think he's going to. But Xander, Fernando, Manny, Kim Ha-sung, I fully believe those guys are going to perform this year. I mean, Fernando did last year. He was still really good. Kim was phenomenal last year. It's Machado and Xander that kind of need to step back up. And if those two can, I think this team will be fine.
I'm
Like,
not worried about Manny at all. He had a down season, but I think he's just going to get back to regular Manny Machado
well, and
this
it
year.
was like they got screwed, like BABIP so badly last year, just as a team.
And
Like,
it was more than just BABIP. It was literally like they had the worst sequencing luck you can imagine all season long, and it was super weird. So I think they're
yeah,
just going to get some good positive regression.
yeah. I was gonna say I cannot imagine that you get that unlucky again. Because if you do, I'm starting to think it's not luck. You're just really good at being bad.
That's true.
Yeah. So
that's the Padres. That's the division. Final thoughts. Standings prediction.
Okay, so I've definitely talked myself into Dodgers number 1. I think my initial thought coming into this was Padres number 2 because I really like that rotation and I expect some positive regression from the lineup. But I think I've convinced myself now that we're going to see a breakout from Brandon Pfaadt with those other 3 guys at the top of the rotation, and we'll find somebody for that number 5 that's going to take Arizona back into the postseason. So I think I'm actually going to go Dodgers, Diamondbacks, Padres, close.
It's really close,
maybe potentially a wild card for both the Diamondbacks and the Padres. Would not be surprised at all. Then the Giants, then the Rockies. Very far back.
Yeah, I'm very torn on Diamondbacks or Padres for number 2. I'm going to go with the Padres. I'm going to say the Padres are number 2, Dodgers 1, Diamondbacks, Giants, and Rockies.
How big of a gap do you think you have between the Diamondbacks and the Giants? Just like, I'm thinking it's like 5 or 6 games at the end of the season. Like, I think it's a kind of substantial drop off between 3 and 4.
Like they're not like 10 games back. They're relatively close, but they're out of it. They're more like a 500 team, the Giants.
Yeah, I think the Giants are like 5 or 6 back from 3rd place.
Sure.
So whatever that would end up being. Yeah, the Rockies are going to be 38 games out of 1st place. Minimum.
It's going to be really bad.
Minimum.
It might be more. It might be 50.
That's why I said minimum. Minimum means it could be more.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right.
This has been Dictionary Time with Mason.
Yes, and it's also been Getaway Day podcast. And thank you for listening to our preview of the NL West. We hope to catch you next time, and we'll talk to you then.
Peace. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. Join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Getaway Day Pod. If you enjoy card collecting, check out our sister YouTube channel at Getaway Day Cards.